talk about emotions today, and I'm going to start by showing you this picture, because I want to highlight how remarkable is our ability to recognize emotions, our human ability to recognize emotions. So when you look at this image, for instance, we don't know anything about these people, but we can capture a lot of things about the atmosphere, right? We see like a positive atmosphere, and these people seem to be engaged and seem to be connecting on something. So all of that is emotional information that we can capture just with one image. And we have this remarkable capacity for recognizing emotions. Why is this capacity useful for us? It's very important in our social interactions. So when we interact with people, we are constantly making guesses about how others feel in order to adapt the way we communicate to others' emotions. It's very important to detect people's needs as well, and also to predict people's reactions. And actually, emotions are so important in our lives and have a strong influence in a lot of our cognitive processes. So for instance, they modulate our attention mechanisms, and they strongly influence our memory and also our learning process. So emotions are so important in our lives. And when we imagine the AI of the future, so I'm going to ask how many of you have seen at least one of these movies here? So most of you have seen at least one of these movies. So you know what I say. I'm not going to make any spoiler, but you know what I'm saying when I say that the machines that we imagine in the future, all of them have some kind of emotional intelligence. But on the other side, emotions are so complex, right? Even for us, sometimes it's difficult to know how others feel. We can grasp some information about the apparent emotional states of people, but it's complex sometimes to know how others feel or even how we feel. So how can machines do something that complex? Well, the thing is that when our emotions change, there are a lot of things that change in our body. So for instance, when we are nervous, usually our heart rate increases, also our respiration rate increases, we sweat, so the electrodermal activity in our skin also changes. Our facial expression changes, our gaze patterns change, our pupil changes as well, our blood pressure, we have different body postures, we use different gestures depending on how we feel. Our voice can change as well, the way we write, the way we type in our phones, for instance. So there are a lot of signals that change with our emotions. So what we can do is all of these signals can be captured with different types of sensors. And then we capture these signals, and if we have data, labeled data with emotions, what we can do is we can try to find patterns in these signals that correlate with emotions and develop machine learning algorithms or systems that can recognize the emotions using this type of information, the same way we process other type of information. I'm going to focus first on so I'm going to talk about some examples of how can we capture this emotional information, and I'm going to start with vision modality, which is one of my areas of expertise. So visual modality, cameras. What has been done so far for recognizing emotions from information captured by cameras? Any idea? What's the most popular research from a computer vision perspective to recognize emotions?
Maybe on this classic data set, facial expression recognition data set from 2016, as I remember.
Exactly. So facial expression is actually the most common approach to recognize emotions. So when I was doing my PhD, I finished like 10 years ago now, and this was a completely unsolved problem. So I was working a little bit in this type of software, trying to recognize key point in the faces, working with images acquired under controlled environments, and nothing was working by then. So now, after 10 years, we have these softwares that work very well in recognizing some of the key points on your face, tracking these key points, and doing some matching between the emotions, so the expressions that are observed, and the possible emotions that they are expressing. And this is an example of a commercial software from a company called Affectiva, where you see that the software detects your key points, analyzes the configuration, and makes some kind of correspondence between this expression and the possible emotion that you are expressing with the facial expression. And this software works very well. So it's very well at detecting the patterns. It's very well at detecting the key points. It's complicated to associate the correct emotion to an expression, a face expression. But it works pretty well in some applications. It's being used for test users, for instance. But the problem of this software is that it does not work in the wild. So we would like to have machines that can recognize emotions in any condition. So if we go back to this image that I showed you before, what happens when we run this type of softwares here? So if we run this type of commercial softwares, we can detect very well the face of this woman, we can detect the key points, and this software is answering in this case that this woman is feeling happiness because it detects a smile with a strong confidence, it detects attention. I don't know exactly how this detection of attention works here, but actually it's pretty accurate. But what happens with him? So what happens with him is that the system is not working. So here we have a problem, and it's all the key points of the face are not actually visible. So we have strong occlusions and highlights because of the glasses of the person. And also we have a profile view, so it's not a frontal view anymore where everything is visible, right? So these type of softwares, when you run them in open environments, you face that when you have non-frontal faces and partial occlusions, they might not work as well as we would like. More problems. So here we have another example. Here is a face. If we run the software, it says you see surprise, the mouth is open, so it's detecting perfectly well a very prototypical expression of surprise. But when we look at the context, we realize that it's not surprise, right? So the thing is that this kit, we see a facial expression here, but has nothing to do with the emotion. It's related to the action he is performing. So some of our facial expressions have nothing to do with our emotions, but with other things. For instance, when you talk, you change a lot your facial expression. It has nothing to do with your emotion. And another difficulty is giving the correct emotional meaning to an isolated facial expression. So I'm going to show you some experiments, some examples of experiments that were performed by psychologists that were studying what's the level of agreement in giving an emotional label to a specific facial expression, like here. So here we see clearly a facial expression. But if I ask you, what's this facial expression communicating? Well, you might think maybe anger, maybe contempt, disgust, fear. So usually people agree that this is a negative valence emotion, but it's not clear what category. The thing is that if I give you some context, suddenly we probably will agree that this is disgust, and this is what happens. People agree here that the face is disgust. But if I give you a different context, then people strongly agree that this is anger. So, and they have a lot of examples, and they run a lot of experiments in using the exact same facial expression in different contexts. And they realize that the context strongly influences the way we perceive emotions. So this is the motivation of one of the projects I'm working on that started here in Barcelona, and now I'm still working on it in collaboration with the Affective Computing group at MIT Media Lab. And the idea behind this project is, okay, we know there's a lot of information in the face, that's true, but for developing machines that accurately recognize emotions, we cannot just rely on the face. We need to understand the context of the person, and in particularly, we are working in the scene context, in the situation of the person. And the interesting thing of working in this type of context is that suddenly you can say much more about the emotions. So maybe with the expression you can say something about basic emotions, but there are some secondary emotions or social emotions that are very interesting that if you don't see the context, you cannot say anything about them. Like here, once you see the context, you might say that this person is feeling confidence when you define confidence as feeling of being certain, conviction that an outcome will be favorable, encouraged, or proud. So that's the idea of the emotion recognition in context project. So what we want to do is we want to go from images like this one, so not just relying on the face, looking also at the context of the person, trying to recognize emotions. And for that, so this is a computer vision project. We know that in computer vision nowadays, what is working best is deep learning models. So our idea was, okay, let's try to model this problem using deep learning. So first challenge that we faced, we didn't have any training data, of course, because as we said before, usually all the research on emotion recognition from images was focused on the face, so we didn't have any data set where we could see people in their context. So we were collecting a lot of images. Some of them were manually downloaded from search engines like Google, and other images came from public data sets that were already labeled with bounding box of the person. And the images we collected are images like the ones that you see here, so people doing different things in very different situations. And what we did is we created annotation interfaces like this one that I'm showing you here, so where we asked annotators to label what emotion category they thought this person was expressing in this specific situation. We had two different interfaces. This is the one of emotion categories, and we have another one for continuous dimensions. So there are different ways of representing emotions in a machine. Categories is one of the most common, and emotional dimensions is the other one. Maybe is less popular, but the idea of the continuous dimensions is to label according to valence, which is a dimension that just measures whether someone is feeling something positive or something negative. Arousal is measuring whether someone is in calm or very ready to act, very agitated. And then dominance, that is measuring whether someone is feeling dominated by the situation, or the opposite is that someone is feeling in control of the situation. And then we also collected some demographics of the person in the picture, like the gender or the estimated age. And we use crowdsourcing for collecting all of these annotations. In particular, we use the platform Amazon Mechanical Turk. And after this process, we came up with what we call the emotic dataset, which is a collection of these images, 23,000 annotated images, 34,000 annotated people, because for some images we have multiple people annotated. This data set is publicly available, so if you are interested, you can download the images and you can download the annotations and play with them. We performed a lot of statistics with the data, so when I finish talking about this project, I'm going to show you the website of the project where you can find the data and the publications that we have. I'm going to show you a little bit about the deep learning model that we developed as a baseline to model this problem. So what we did, it's a very simple model. This is the representation of the architecture. So basically, we have as input the image, and we know the location of the target person that we are trying to recognize the emotion of. And then we have one module that is extracting person features. So it's fully convolutional, and we extract features of the bounding box containing the person. And then we have another module, which is the context features that takes as an input the whole image and extract also enough using a fully convolutional network features about the context. And then we merge these features. We have one fully connected layer, and we separate the recognition of valence, arousal, and dominance, and the emotion categories. And the type of loss function that we use is regression, because from our experiments, we saw that it was the best way to model our data. So these are the type of results that we get. So these are the type of images that we get. This is recognition of anticipation, excitement, engagement, and confidence in this case. This is another example of recognition, pleasure, happiness, and affection in this other picture. Another one pretty challenging that here is it recognizes happiness, the system, but here you don't see the face. So clearly, somehow it is extracting some information about the context and the situation. Here another interesting example where for this guy, the recognition of emotions was like pleasure, affection, and happiness. But for the other person, it was like a mess, so it recognized almost everything possible. And so this is showing that not all the information is coming just from the context, but it's the combination of the context and the person which actually creates the output. So the truth is that this system is not working very well, so this is the first attempt in trying to recognize emotions using not just face, but using person and situational context. So this is our first baseline. We are progressing in this project in different directions, but so far, if you are curious, you can visit the website of the project, you can download our data, you'll find our publications, and soon we will publish the code. And this is a joint work with my PhD student, Rona Costi, that just graduated 2 weeks ago, and some of my collaborators, Jose and Adria. Okay, so this is one of the projects I've been working and related with emotions and images. I'm going to switch to a different modality now, so I'm going to talk about text. So another source of information where you can get when you can get information about the emotions of people is text, right? Depending on how we feel, we use different words and we express ourselves in a different way when we write. So let me show you one example. So this is so the Red House restaurant is a restaurant in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in USA. So if you go to this restaurant and you never went to this restaurant and you want to know how good is this restaurant, what do you do? So you Google this restaurant and you get all of these reviews, right? So this is one example of a review of the Red House restaurant. Okay, so let's focus in a piece of this review. So here it says, what a delight, terrific menu, great craft cocktails, unpretentious atmosphere of mostly locals and college professors chatting over dinner. Okay, so we read this type of reviews, and from these reviews, we decide whether we want to go to the restaurant or not. Somehow we capture the idea of whether this restaurant is good or not. But it is not saying, this is a good restaurant, go there, or this is not a good restaurant, don't go there, okay? So from this type of information, can you tell me if the person that wrote this text was feeling something positive or something negative about the restaurant? Is it positive? It's very clear. For us, it's very easy to do, right? So one thing that we can think is maybe we can develop algorithms that do the same. So actually, there's a lot of research in trying to capture sentiment from text. This problem is called sentiment analysis in text. And this is one of the state-of-the-art models. It's called DeepMoji. It was developed in MIT Media Lab, not in Affective Computing group, which is the group I'm working on. It was developed on social machines. And the idea behind this method is quite simple. So there's large-scale data behind this and deep learning. So basically, they took 1,200 million tweets containing emojis. So they selected the most common, the 64 most common emojis, and they were collecting a huge amount of tweets that contained these emojis. And they formulated the following problem. So taking as an input the text, we want to predict the emoji of this text. And so they have a deep learning architecture. You can, actually the code is available, and they have also a demo online. So this is a screen capture of the demo. So if you enter the text I showed you before, you'll see this type of output. So this is the emojis that are predicted from the text. And what is interesting is that you see here like different intensities of the words. This is because the deep learning model has an attention layer. So it can capture the contribution of the different words to this prediction. And actually, this demo is very cool because you can cross the different words and see how the emojis change when you remove some words. So, and this is working pretty well. And there are other models that are similar to this one that also work pretty well for text sentiment analysis. So, what we were interested actually was in the interactive scenarios. So it's very important to have machines that can recognize emotions in text, but we think that it's also very important that if you imagine an interactive scenario, with interactive scenario I mean a chatbot, that this chatbot is somehow aware of the emotion of the user that is chatting with. So let's talk a little bit about these chatbots, and chatbots is a huge area of research as well. There are a lot of categorizations of chatbots, but one categorization that you may have is goal-oriented chatbots versus open domain chatbots. The difference is that for goal-oriented, the chatbots are supposed to help the user to do some specific task. For instance, in a website of a store, they are supposed to help you find a specific product that you need. Another example would be there are some chatbots that help you find a restaurant in your city that matches your expectations. Okay, so this is goal-oriented. But you have also open domain chatbots. And The goal of open domain chatbots is just to chat with you in an intelligent way, entertain you, or being able of interacting with you in an intelligent way. So let's focus in these open domain chatbots. One thing one problem that we face when we try to train this type of chatbots is how can we evaluate these open dialogue systems? It's very difficult because here you don't have like a clear reward when you train the system. It's not like if it's goal-oriented and the task is to help the user to find a restaurant at the end of the conversation, you know whether the user found a restaurant, yes or not, right? And you can use this information to train the chatbot. But in open domain, you don't have like a clear loss function. So how can you evaluate them? So one option is to use automatic text metrics. You can have like a test set of dialogues and use automatic text metrics or embedding distance-based metrics so that you have your dialogues, your test set, you have the inputs you generate with the bot, the supposed output after this input, and you compare with the dialogue that you have with these automatic metrics. So the problem is that there are different studies, like this one here, is that these automatic metrics or embedding distance-based metrics do not match very well the experience of the user. So it's actually not very well correlated. So that's why in most of the cases when people are working with open domain chatbots, they use human evaluation. Okay? So human evaluation, the common practice of human evaluation in this type of dialogue systems is to use what it's called one-turn evaluation. So in one-turn evaluation, you have something like that. You have a context that you give to the bot. And then the bot generates an answer. So here you have this context. I think I want an iPad 2, but I already have an iBook. Want versus need. And the response of the chatbot in this case is, I'm sorry. Okay, if we ask a human to rate this specific answer after this specific context, you might agree or not, but it's not that bad. Oh, particularly because I didn't say that, but we are working with generative neural network models, which means that our bots do not have like a large set of predefined answers that are grammatically correct. We are generating the answer from an embedding space, from a word embedding space. So we even face the problem of being grammatically correct. This is really challenging. We are learning to be grammatically correct just from our training data. So just the fact of giving an answer that is grammatically correct is kind of a success. So anyway, you can say, okay, it's more or less acceptable. It makes sense. The answer, I'm sorry, because the context is like, I don't know what I want, it's whatever. But what happens when you keep talking with this bot? So the user says, should I buy an iPad 2? And the bot says, I'm sorry, I don't want to know. Then the user says, you are weird. And then the bot says, I'm sorry. Okay, so here we have a problem about diversity. So basically, this bot always goes to the same space and always generate I'm sorry or something close to I'm sorry, right? So if you use just one-turn evaluation and it happens that the answer of the bot is kind of acceptable in different contexts, you might rate very well this bot, while this bot in diversity is horrible. So what we think is that we really need interactive evaluation for evaluating these bots. It's not enough to have one-turn evaluation. And the other thing that we think is that usually these bots are evaluated about the overall quality, meaning overall how was the quality of the chat. But there are other aspects of the conversation that are very important. For instance, the diversity, so how non-repetitive were the chatbot's response, or the fluency, how correct were the grammar and the sentence structure of the chatbot's response. So this makes sense when you use generative models. Contingency, how related to your message were the chatbot's response, right? You don't want to talk about troubles and then the bot answering about, I don't know, movies. And of course, empathy. This is something you really care about. So how emotionally appropriate were the chatbot's response, okay? This is what we wanted to study, and our goal was to create a better automatic way of measuring the capacity of the bot in all of these aspects, okay? So for that, what we did is we developed an open source platform for multi-turn evaluation. Here you see a screen capture of this platform. So in this platform, you can upload any dialogue model that you already trained, and you can ask the user to talk with the bot, And then after the user talks with the bot, you can ask the user to rate the bot according to the different aspects that I mentioned. Okay, so we use different types of models to play with in this project. And yeah, so in total we had like 6 different models. I'm not gonna explain these models, but basically it's not that important. So basically we had different models and the regularized models, so the same models with regularization that we imposed here in the model, which is, so this is the original model, and then what we do is we ask the bot at this point to be able to contain information so that you can recognize ED emotion using this type of automatic methods, and also the semantic similarity. So and for that we use some semantic sentence embedding system. Well, we train the models with different types of data. We use two data sets, the kernel data set, which is a movie script data set, and then the Reddit data set, which is a data set that we collected. And these are conversations from the Reddit forum casual conversation. So what we did is human interactive evaluation. So we asked the humans to talk with our models, so the 3 models, the baseline and the regularized version, models trained with kernel dataset and models trained with Reddit dataset. And we observed that in general, so in both phases, you have like the best ratings. So it's pretty consistent that when you ask the users to interact with the models, they usually find that the regularized version is better. Okay. But when you evaluate the traditional metrics, what you observe is that it's more like a mess. This is just the quality. So as I said before, we also found that traditional automatic metrics do not correlate very well with the human ratings. So these are examples of the dialogues. What we did basically is so we have these trajectories of the conversations, and what we can do from these conversations is to compute different automatic metrics, but on the whole conversation. Automatic metrics that we defined using some findings in psychology on how to characterize how you can characterize good conversations. So sentiment metrics, so compute. Yeah, you can find all of the details of these metrics in the paper, but these are metrics that you can compute automatically using like this type of deep emoji algorithm. Also some engagement metrics like the question score, how many questions did the user ask when the user was talking to the bot, because it's known that the more questions you do, it's like it's showing engagement, and the number of words, so you use longer sentences when you feel more engaged as well. And then other semantic metrics that you can compute automatically. So this is a total of 11 metrics that you can compute along the conversation that you have. Okay. What you can do also is you can compute a hybrid metric, which is a linear combination of these 11 metrics. And what we do is we try to learn these weights here, so these hybrid metrics, so that you can approximate the human rating. So now it worked well. Now what you can do is you have this conversation of the bot and the human, you compute the hybrid metric, you have also the human evaluation, but we observe that there's a high correlation. So if the bot is better, the score of the hybrid metric is better as well. So as I said, the goal was to approximate the human rating without having the human in the loop. But here we still need the human to talk with the bot to generate this conversation and compute all of these metrics. Well, the other thing that we can do is use what we call the self-play scenario. So let's remove the human and let's put the bot to talk to itself. Because if the bot talks to itself, we also can generate these conversations, and we also can compute this hybrid metric and see how well we approximate the human ratings. And this is the main finding of our paper. What we observed is that here is a correlation matrix. Here you have all the ratings of the human. Here you have the traditional automatic metrics. Here are the metrics that we defined. And at the end, here is the hybrid metric. And we observed that the strongest correlation is with the hybrid metric. Okay, so we found a way of approximating the human rating without having the human in the loop. So this paper is going to be published in NeurIP's conference this year, and the code is available. I was going to talk about the applications of affective computing. Sorry, I don't have time. But as final conclusions, I think emotional technologies are useful and have lots of applications. So these technologies are being used for user experience monitoring, for educational purposes. When you imagine online settings and chatbots, so it's also very important to take care about the emotions, and also for medical purposes and for emotional well-being purposes, and of course for human-robot interaction. We are no close of having machines that understand emotions as humans do, but we are slowly finding solutions to specific problems that require emotional intelligence. And here is a lot of resources of the projects I'm working on. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for a great speech. My question will be connected with your computer vision part. What was backbone? I mean, CNN, special CNN architecture was used in your approach. It's a first part of my question. And the second part, was it pre-trained on some close task, for example, face recognition, or it was trained from scratch?
Yeah,
thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just trying to recover the architecture of the. So yeah, as you said, we didn't have enough data to train everything from scratch. This is a huge model with a lot of parameters. So what we did is we have these two modules of person features and context features. So we use ImageNet object classification to pre-train the person features. ImageNet contains person as one of the object categories, and we use Places dataset to train the contextual features. Places dataset is a scene-centric dataset, and then we did a fine-tune. So we train also the last layers, and we do a fine-tuning with our dataset.
And did you try to use not ImageNet, or for example, architect that was trained on VGG face dataset?
Yeah. So the thing is, in around 30% of the images in our dataset, we don't have the face completely visible, or the resolution of the face is very small. So it's very complicated to extract these details of facial expression, but I agree with you that this is something that we should do, and we can actually have like an additional module, right? As soon as we can detect the face and we can extract reliable features of the face, we should be able of merging face, body, or whole body and context features, and that would be better. So this is one of the next steps that we would like to do.